Hi Ravenous Hot Take Leeches, I'm opinionated, and you're watching the newest thing to get enraged over for no good reason. Every generation of Pokemon introduced some mechanic that was really stupid and broken, and that's hard to argue. Some, like Gen 1 Bind, are very well known, but other dumpster fires, such as Gen 2's, have been largely left to smolder. But half of you have never even heard of a Berserk gene. But among the infinite weathers of Gen 3, or Stealth Rock in Gen 4, or Gen 5's famed type gems, or any of the 3D games' one-and-done type gimmicks, none are quite so goddamn infuriating as Paldea's massive diarrhea pile, known as terastallization. That's a big word, and I have a deeply rooted fear of syllables, so I'll call it Tera. Now, what's so different about Tera from Game Freak's other one-night stands? Mega Evolution was fumbled, but that wasn't so much a mechanics issue as it was a Kalos issue. Z moves were rather boring and usually stupid, but ultimately not awful. Dynamax was unbalanced as all hell, but at least it had the decency to be straightforward about it. Tera, on the other hand, adds an all-new, completely fucking bullshit dimension to Pokemon that nothing else ever has. Out of Pokemon's core mechanics, there's one that stands out to me as the most core, the mechanic that makes Pokemon what it is, and that would be types. For those of you here that clicked on my tiny-ass channel's video about a niche subject and somehow don't know, every Pokemon and move is assigned a type. Pokemon can have up to 2. Their strengths and unique attributes are so important to balance to the point where I don't even think about it anymore when building a team. I just balance types reflexively. There's nearly no interaction that you can have that isn't governed by types in some capacity. How do you stop a Frosmoth with 2 Quiver Dances up? Bring in a Steel type that resists all the shit. How do you bolster your Fairy type attacker's offense? Slot on a ground move, if it learns one. Let's say you're Game Freak. How do you balance an extremely strong and fast Electric type? Don't give it any Ice, Water, or Grass moves. It's apparent that messing with types very much can throw off the whole game in a big way, and that was proven in Gen 6 with the addition of the Fairy type. Ever since, Fairy has been indisputably dominant, with Pokemon like Xerneas, Zacian, Fluttermane, Azumarill, Omega Mawile, Clefable, and the 3 good Guardian deities face-fucking any metagame they're allowed in. In Gen 5, Dragon was the best type. Very little could survive the outrages and Draco Meteors being thrown around. But as of Gen 6 onwards, Dragon-type attackers might not even run Dragon Stab. In XY, Dragonite literally ran Fly, because Fairy was immune to its Dragon Stab. I was sure that Game Freak would never again so recklessly shake up how type matchups work. Surely they knew that much, right? Oh, how wrong I was. Hold on, I'm not done explaining yet. Let's talk about variance in information. Anyone who's played a slightly competitive game of Pokemon in their life knows that it's a game where the more you know about your opponent and their team, the easier it is to make the correct decision. This seems kinda obvious saying it out loud, but I promise it's really important to say first. There's a lot of very small ways to gather info about the enemy Pokemon that come as second nature to strong players, such as being able to tell that their Kingambit has Sucker Punch based on what it's sent in against, or whether their attackers are holding choice items based on when it does and doesn't switch out. There's a lot you can tell about a Pokemon if you're paying attention, and you need to be able to do it quickly and decisively if you want to make the right plays. Pokemon that have a lot of different moves and sets they like to use are strong because it's harder to glean information about them. Let's take Ogerpon as an example. Ogerpon has a very deep supportive move pool as well as strong offensive spreads, so there are several ways it can be used. If your opponent is smart, you might not be able to tell whether their Ogerpon is Swords Dance or Follow Me, or maybe even both until it's too late. And you have to play assuming the worst even if it puts you at a bit of a disadvantage. What's just as important for info gathering is knowing what to rule out immediately. For example, you know that Garchomp isn't running priority because Garchomp doesn't learn any. You know your Great Tusk OHKO's that Clodsire because Clodsire is slow, weak to ground, and has low defense. You know your Gliscor can wall that Regieleki because it doesn't learn any ice moves. There's nothing you can do to obscure this kind of information. No matter what you do, Garchomp will never learn priority. Clodsire will always be weak to ground, and Regieleki will never learn an ice move. Until, that is, Gen 9 happens. Alright, preamble over, the gloves are coming off now. I'm not gonna pretend to understand the thought process behind Tera. I just read out an entire paragraph explaining how it fundamentally doesn't work without even mentioning it once. On a foundational level, letting you change a Pokemon's type is such a horrible concept. You brought in your Steel type against the +2 Frosmoth. and now you should be able to force it out or kill it, right? Well, apparently Game Freak is running a sale on setup sweepers because it called now and suddenly it's fire type and one-shot your safe counter for absolutely free. Your fairy type attacker of choice doesn't have any half-decent ground moves to run. What now? Well, actually it does, and it has stab on it. It's called Tera Blast. That super strong electric type looks pretty balanced with that well-curated move pool, right? Only at first glance, it actually just got banned because it has literally any coverage it wants. The sheer amount of information you can hide by changing, or sometimes not changing, a Pokemon's Tera type is unreal. Now, you can't be sure whether or not Clodsire is going to be weak to ground. Now, you can't be sure whether your Gliscor can wall this Regieleki, or if it gets one-shot by an ice move. And it's not a binary Regieleki can either be electric or ice either. There are 19 possible types that Pokemon can Tera to, and you don't know which one you're staring down until it's too late. That's far too many options to take into account for the limited amount of time you have to think on your turn. Sure, some are worse than others. You can be reasonably sure you won't be seeing Tera Bug or Rock or anything like that, but who knows? Think an electric move is safe to use on a Azumarill since it usually tears to grass? What happens when it tears to ground then? It takes a free kill because you didn't know a Azumarill was going to gain an immunity all of a sudden. It simply doesn't work. There's no way a mechanic like this could ever be balanced and fun. I've lost countless battles simply because my opponent clicked their free win button first and there was no way I could possibly have known that Kingambit was suddenly going to be immune to Earthquake. That's complete bullshit. It feels like I didn't lose because I made a mistake, but because God said so. I've won countless battles simply by clicking my win button before my opponent. And same story. It doesn't feel like I won because my team is better, or because I'm a better player. It feels like I won because God said so. And that's a worse feeling for me than a fair loss because I didn't fucking deserve it. In VGC formats, you're required to give your opponent your full team info besides stats, including what Tera types you have. This isn't a perfect solution, not by a long shot, but at least then you know whether that Kingambit is going to be immune to your ground or your fighting moves. That's about all I have to say about Tera's defensive utility, because despite being the strongest and most horseshit part about it, it's absolutely the simplest to explain and understand. You know how strong a Pokemon suddenly flipping its weaknesses into resistances with no warning is, end of story. What's far more interesting to discuss is its offensive applications. And God, is it fucking offending me. But first, allow me to digress, and talk about Tera's closest comparison, the now defunct Hidden Power. What HP did is allow any Pokemon to gain access to an attack of any type. However, HP was very limited. First, it had low base power, and HP Ground is probably never going to one-shot that Heatran unless it's coming off a huge special attack. Second, it was a special move only. Physical Mons only used HP in very niche circumstances, like some Landorus would run HP Ice to keep other Landorus and some other quad Ice Weak Mons in check. Of course, this was coming off Lando's not great but still respectable 105 special attack, and it would never one-shot, so any physical attacker with a lower special attack than that just couldn't run Hidden Power. It was still a strong move. It saw heavy use on strong special Mons with one or two major blind spots, like Serperior and Volcarona. Tera and Tera Blast, however, work a bit differently. Tera Blast is an 80 base power move that starts out special, but uses whichever attack is higher when the user Teras. This means not only do physical attackers get to abuse it as well, but every user gets stab on it, along with the initially higher base power. This makes Tera Blast about twice as strong as Hidden Power, at the cost of maybe a little versatility from not being able to use it without using Tera first, but it clearly doesn't matter, judging by the several OU bans that came about solely because the Pokemon in question was an extremely good abuser of Tera. Volcarona, Regieleki, Espathra, probably a couple others have been banished to Ubers for no good reason. The generation's vomit-inducing gimmick simply favored them way more. If there was no Tera and they had to use Hidden Power instead, they wouldn't be broken at all. And I can say that with absolute certainty because in Gen 8 Nat Dex, a format where both Regieleki and Hidden Power exist, Regieleki is in UU right now. Not even OU, not anywhere close to Ubers. There's one more basic mechanic with Tera, and that's same type Tera, or Stab Tera as I like to call it. It just boosts that Stab type's boost from 1.5 to 2, simple but effective. A Golden Go with Tera Steel, let's say, would just be able to shed its Ghost and Darken weaknesses while keeping its Ghost Stab, and simultaneously boost its Steel moves to ludicrous power levels. This is a much lesser used mechanic, because using Tera defensively is the objective strongest way to use it. That's not to say it's useless though. Palkia likes Tera Water and New Ubers to get rid of its fairy weakness and boost its water stab further, which hits harder than Jet Fuel in the sense that it can very much melt steel beams. Kyogre does something very similar, but Tera Water doesn't offer it any defensive utility, it just makes its water spout downright apocalyptic. Dragapult and Landorus use Tera Ghost and Flying respectively, because neither of them get any good stab moves of that type. They would likely benefit from a defensive Tera more if they did, but a Tera Blast coming off that juicy double stab is worth it. Gen 9 Competitive is not a game about Pokemon, it is a game about Tera. And Tera is not well thought out. Personally, I would love to see a complete ban on it from Smogon, but seeing any action at all to make Tera slightly less cancerous would be a good thing. So why is it that, when even Game Freak has put the restriction of your opponent always knows what Tera types your Pokemon have in their official tournaments, have Smogon refused to do anything? Are they stupid, or just too scared of morons who don't know what they're talking about getting mauled on Twitter.com? My battle simulator that I go to do cope about maybe Scarlet and Violet isn't all bad has been ruined by Scarlet and Violet, and that means something is horribly wrong. Well, I'm tired. New video about something, probably, at some point not too far off.